More than 120 nations in the area are now among China's most significant trading partners. These nations include the heir of the globe as well as the United States, Brazil, Japan, and India. China often owns or develops ports in other nations to advance its economic activity. China has said that it plans to spend $7.02 billion in collaboration with Malaysia. The goal of this project is to construct Huangjing Port, which will be the biggest port in. Despite this, both Singapore and the US are anxious about the prospect of a port. How will the growth of this supersport affect China and Malaysia? Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all of the alarming worldwide initiatives. You will not be sorry. So let's get this party started. As international commerce has expanded, the strait has become the most significant trading route between the nations. The Malacca Strait is a body of water that separates the island of Sumatra from the Malay Peninsula. It is now regarded as one of the world's most significant critical straits, connecting the Pacific and Indian Ocean. The region's yearly economic turnover surpasses tens of billions of dollars, and cargo ships pass by on a regular basis. The Malacca Strait is now not just one of the most important commerce routes in the world, but also a marine lifeline for nations such as Japan, China, and South Korea, as well as other countries with significant imports and exports. It is fairly natural given that China is now the nation with the fastest development rates in terms of its trade business. Pay close attention to the issue of disadvantaged neighborhoods. Malaysia is an essential center for the building of the Maritime Silk Road, not just in the ACS area, but also in the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative as a whole. The economies of China and Malaysia, as well as their commercial operations, would gain substantially from collaboration in developing a new one. Even in the distant future, it may take over the critical function now served by Singapore's existing port. China and Malaysia have been collaborating for a long time. Both nations will collaborate to finish the Huangjing Port project, which will result in the development of a deep water supply port. It has been brought to my notice that the Malaysian port of Huangjing has a total area of 1,366 acres, including 3 man-made islands and 1 natural island. The entire investment in the project was $14.05 billion, of which China provided $7.02 billion, According to the two nations' plans, the Huangjing Port will be finished in 2025, while the deep water port will be finished in 2019. By 2025, the Port of G will be larger than all other ports in the Malacca Strait. Huangjing's port capacity will be estimated in hundreds of millions of tons in the near future. It is often assumed that the deepwater supply terminal, known as in-port, has a capacity less than that of all American ports combined. However, China terminating collaboration with Malaysia in the middle of such a huge port development project, even though it has not yet been finished, is unusual. Then there's the matter of what transpired. In truth, the Huangjing Port project, a joint venture between China and Malaysia, was unexpectedly halted owing to a combination of 2 factors. When Mayer, who was 97 at the time, became Malaysia's prime minister, he abruptly terminated 4 Chinese investment projects totaling more than $22 billion in value. China faced substantial financial losses as a consequence. Following the discovery that these 4 projects violated the conditions of the agreement, Malaysia's answer to China was that the project's cost was exorbitant. As a last desperate effort to preserve the situation, the collaboration was stopped. For up to 8 months, the thought of constructing a vacation port in Malaysia enrages China even more. Malaysia owes China a total of 20 million ringgit in construction-related charges. This debt has grown over time. During Malaysia's financial crisis, a substantial number of Chinese laborers were there. China has officially confirmed that they would not continue building of the Huangjing Port in Malaysia after being fired without severance compensation. Malaysia is required under the project agreement to make a major payment to China in the amount of $400 million as liquidated harm. However, they breached their responsibility by refusing to compensate China for any damages suffered. Because of liquidation, both China and Malaysia have suffered significant financial losses as a consequence of the breakup of their relationship over the port of Huangjing. The Huangjing Port project, on the other hand, will reach a critical juncture in 2022. So, what precisely is happening here? Malaysia has seen ongoing ramifications as a result of a variety of factors in recent years. As a consequence, Malaysia's economy, the third biggest in the world, has lost pace. Malaysia recognizes the significance of China and the port of Huangjing and intends to initiate cooperation projects with China to boost local economy. This is one of the tactics used by Malaysia. The Wingport project was restarted after being halted for almost a year. As a consequence of Malaysia and China reaching an agreement, China was permitted to proceed with the Wingport project, which is expected to be finished by the end of 2026. However, the implications of this disclosure will be terrible for Singapore. Even Singapore attempted to reunify with the United States of America, which contributed to the Wingport project's demise. So, why is Singapore acting in this manner? What are the ramifications for Singapore? It is hard to exaggerate the significance of the Singapore port to the Singapore economy. Despite the fact that the port of Huangjing does not have the same geographical advantages as the port of Singapore, the country's port has the potential to become the second biggest cargo port in the world in the next decades due to Singapore's favorable position in the Asia-Pacific area. However, there is complaining. Land reclamation will convert it into a gigantic artificial port. The Huangjing port size will also enable it to capture at least a fourth of the trade share of the Singapore port. This is because the intake is greater. Furthermore, China, the country responsible for the building of the deepwater terminal at Malaysia's port of Huangjing, will berth international commercial ships at Malaysia's port of Huangjing. In such a situation, China's commercial policies would be detrimental to Singapore. They will be unable to pose a danger to China, and neither will the United States be able to do so. As a consequence, China's economy will rise faster. In truth, the United States has long been Singapore's big tree, because to this assistance, Singapore is able to maintain firm control over the Malacca Strait on a regular basis. This port is critical to Singapore's capacity to deal with the rise of marine commerce, which affects not just China, but also other Asian nations. When the deepwater terminal is finished, China and other nations will concentrate the majority of their commerce in the port of Huangjing. If this occurs, Singapore's income would suffer substantially, and the United States' interests will continue to erode as a result. Singapore and the United States are under a lot of pressure because China has one of the most successful trade stories in the world. There should be several chances for collaboration. In addition to the import, which is currently under construction, Brazil and China are collaborating on additional ports. Furthermore, China has several well-established ports, such as Chengdu Port, Ningbo Port, Lion Port, An Port, Lion Port, and others. Another key element is how these ports are perceived in the rest of the world. As a result, Western nations, headed by the United States, are unable to pose a threat to China's economic activity, which is dependent primarily on the port. When the import is finished, China and Malaysia will collaborate to expand their positions in the world market to new heights. What long-term advantages do you anticipate from China's investment in the Huangjing port as a result of this? Thank you for taking the time to watch. Click on the following videos to learn more about another frightening project.